Has anyone ever told you that you're overreacting or being dramatic if you are having issues with PTSD or triggered or having a panic attack? They definitely have to me, and I wanted to talk today about that experience and what I've done with it. Hey guys, it's Jo and welcome back to Trauma Talk. When people respond to our trauma and to our reactions to trauma and to triggers and anxiety and panic attacks with statements like, you know, you really just need to get over it, or like, why are you being so dramatic, or why are you acting out like this, or trying to minimize or silence, it is difficult to deal with. Because on the one hand, we might, or we might not, but we might rationally know, you know what, I have a right to feel this way. I am working through trauma. Trauma changes you. I don't have control over this trigger in my life right now. I am working on it. It's a process. Like, I have a right to feel this way, and that's okay. That's a rational thing, and you may or may not know that and accept that. But on the flip side of it, I think a lot of shame comes into play, and those words tap into a lot of shame, because a lot of us feel like we should be okay. A lot of us feel like we should be happy or okay or further along in the journey than we are, or, you know, we should be something else than what we are. And when people make those statements, it taps into that shame and that guilt and that self-hate, that self-not acceptance, and it makes it difficult to deal with. And I get that. And so when people have said these things to me, the thing that I have come to understand over the long term, and this has been a long process of me coming to understand this, is first of all, they don't understand what they're doing. Generally, people are uncomfortable with themselves, they're uncomfortable with emotion, they don't understand trauma, they don't get what's going on, they may not want to. They may not want to take the time or the energy to understand it. And so their reaction is to minimize you and minimize what you're going through and invalidate your feelings. That is not okay, but oftentimes it's the reality of the situation. It's taken me a while to understand that it's okay to be upset at people for what they said to me, but also understand that they may not have meant it the way that it came across. They may not have meant it to echo around in my subconscious for years and add to my shame and self-guilt and hatred. And they may have just been saying that because they are personally uncomfortable dealing with emotion. It's okay to acknowledge that anger, it's okay to acknowledge that hurt, but the reality may also be that it wasn't intended. Now, what do we do with those relationships? I think that there are a couple options, obviously. The first and best option that I found is in the moments and in the relationships where I was willing to take the energy, and believe me, I understand that this takes a lot of energy, and when you are trying to survive the aftermath of trauma, energy is a very, very limited resource. And so I kind of chose sparingly who I spent this resource on, as unfair as that may sound. But there were some people who didn't respond to me the best way when I was having a reaction to someone, when I was not okay, when I was triggered or whatever. And I took the time to explain to them how their words or actions were affecting me and requested a different response. And that worked out okay most of the time. Some people heard me, some people didn't, and then at least I knew where they were coming from. If I could explain to someone, hey, when I was having a panic attack, you seemed like you didn't care, you seemed like you just wanted me to shut up and calm down, and you seemed like you did not want to understand where I was coming from. And that affected me by adding a lot to the shame and guilt that I was feeling already. And like, I'm having trouble dealing with my emotions. I understand that it's weird, I understand that it's uncomfortable, but I'm asking for your help, and I need your help during this time. And like, opening up and being vulnerable and telling them what they caused me to feel and asking for their assistance and telling them what I need and saying, I need you, if you can, to listen and just be there. And people who were like, oh my God, you know, I get it, I'm sorry, I'll be there. At least I knew where they stood. And then there were some people who were on the other side of the fence and didn't want to deal with that and didn't want to be there. And you know what? I got it, and I understood, and I dealt with that loss and grief and moved on. Having those confrontational conversations is not easy. Is not easy. Like I said, it takes energy, but I found that it's really worth it. And if you can't have those conversations, you generally figure out where people lay in the scheme of friendship, and if they're going to be there for you and if they're going to try to understand pretty quickly. People show up or they don't show up. And so where I didn't have the energy to actually have confrontational conversations with people, I sort of found out pretty quickly where people were and if they could deal with me and if they could be there for me and if they could have positive experiences and reactions to me in this new Jordan, in this new way of dealing with life, in this new person that I was after trauma. And that was okay too. I kind of just took more of an observation standpoint, if that made sense, to these relationships when I didn't have the energy for that confrontation, and decided for myself, are these relationships worth spending time on? And some were, and some weren't. And sometimes I decided, you know what, these people are not safe to talk about real things with. They're not safe to have conversations that are deep. They're not safe to talk about what's really going on because they don't have good reactions. Their reactions add to my shame. And so I didn't cut them out of my life, but I just didn't engage with them on real topics, if that makes sense. And then there were some people I just, you know what, kind of said bye to in general because their reactions hurt me, and whether or not I talked to them about what was going on, it was just sucking energy away from me. And it's okay to end relationships or take time away from relationships if that relationship is hurting you. And so for the relationships that were hurting me, I ended them or took time away from them. So that's sort of how I dealt with those reactions to me. I'm not sure if any of that sounds unfair or not, but that is just where I sort of landed with things in trying to survive the aftermath of trauma. And people's words really do have a deep effect. And I found that people's words and reactions to me in vulnerable moments when I was not okay really either helped the shame and guilt that I was feeling or deeply added to it. And that was something that I've taken years to sort of piece apart and figure out and come to terms with. And whatever you're feeling is okay. If you have a hard time when people react to you badly, that's okay. You're amongst the majority. People don't necessarily know how to respond to people when they've been traumatized. So when you can have conversations with people who you care about, when you can direct them towards education or explain how you're really feeling, do that. When you have that energy, when that relationship is worth it, I would always encourage you to have that conversation and see if you can repair that relationship and let them know where you're coming from. Now, before we get to the last part of this video, I'd like you to stop for just a second, hit subscribe or like if you're on Facebook so you do not miss any upcoming videos. I talk about trauma, life after trauma, issues with trauma, relationships with trauma 2 times a week. Every Sunday and Thursday I release a new video. But after you've hit subscribe, I would love for you to comment and tell me about a time in your life when someone has said either the right thing or the wrong thing to a situation that you have either been vulnerable or triggered in after trauma, and how that has either helped or hurt you. I love your opinion, your advice, and where your experience has been. I am Jo Beckwith, and this is Trauma Talk. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being you, and thank you for fighting the good fight and staying on the planet. Take care of yourselves. I will see you soon. I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye, guys.